What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 102 of the Book Binge. It still boggles my mind that I've gotten to over 100 episodes of this series. But for this video, you're going to notice a couple things that might be a little bit different, at least if you're watching it. The first thing being that the camera's a little bit more zoomed out than it has been for the last couple months of my videos, generally speaking. That's because for this video, a lot of the books that I'm going to be talking about, I don't own. I own a few of them, but I don't own far more than I do own. So for this one, I'm going to be including images over on this side of the screen of book covers rather than holding them up like I normally would. So I'm kind of over here and allowing more space to allow for future me to be able to edit in images a little bit more easily than I would if I were super zoomed in and like this, just kind of in the middle of the screen. So I'm not going to do that. On the actual topic at hand for this video, I will just say I have recently become enamored with sort of the idea of reading novels that were originally published serially in a sort of serial format, following some sort of serial-esque schedule, whether that be reading chapters or whatever of a book that released monthly on the actual days that they released, technically speaking, just several years later, or doing it in a weekly format, just following the monthly serial schedule or something like that. I've just been entranced as of recent by the idea of reading some of these old novels that were published in various different amounts over the course of a couple years, depending on how long they were, maybe even a few years, depending on how long they were, and reading them in a way that is at least sort of serialized, even if I don't follow the full 2 years that it might have taken a book by, say, Dickens, for example, to have been published. And there I'm kind of tipping my hand a little bit, but that is fine. I also feel like reading some serial novels in serial format, generally speaking, could be really fun for read-alongs. For example, in my Discord server, by the time this video is coming out, I'm sure I have published my Discord server publicly at this point, or at least have included links on portions of, say, my website, maybe in the descriptions of videos or something like that, maybe on my YouTube channel's main homepage, I suppose you could say. I don't know for sure. I want to say I have by this point in time, since it is nearly September when this video comes out. Either way, I just feel like instead of doing read-alongs with, say, my Discord server or with friends in general or whatever the case may be, instead of doing those, instead of it being a full novel over the course of a month for a read-along, or even a full novel if it's a long one over the course of 2 months, just vague schedule like that, or even if it be books in a series month after month after month, depending on what's going on, I feel like doing a sort of serialized reading. So say like reading, we'll get into this a little bit more when I bring up specific examples, but like I said, reading sort of the serialized publishing, following the schedule of that, whether it be for the full months, but more likely on a sort of weekly format, I feel like it's a little bit more of a chill reading experience, allows you to kind of experience sort of what the readers of these novels originally experienced when they were first being published all those years ago, or on the other hand, just being able to experience them in a little bit different way than we normally would today, or that, say, most people would today if they're just reading some of these books all the way through. Let's just kind of talk about some of the ones that I feel like I'd be more interested in doing this for. Fair warning, you might see a couple of these authors up here more than once, although I've kind of organized them as such in the first place. First off, I do want to go into some honorable mentions. First of all, with books that I hadn't really heard of before I started doing research of this video, or books that I didn't originally know were serialized. One of these books is going to be In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. I apologize if it is wrong. I had never heard of this book before this research, but the idea and the concept of it does sound interesting to me, especially since I believe it's based off of real events. Actually, let me go ahead and double check that real quick. Yeah, according to my research, In Cold Blood is about a true event. It is a nonfiction book, apparently. It's not just a novel. It is based off of what I can gather, 4 murders that happened in 1959. Is a book that, like I said, the idea just kind of seems interesting to me to read about, so I just kind of decided I wanted to include this in this video, even though I'd never heard of the book before doing my research, but it was brought up a lot in a lot of several different lists on the internet of some of the best serialized novels. Another honorable mention is The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. Again, a book that I had only vaguely heard of this title before. I know I've heard of this title before, and not just because, the picture of Dorian Gray or anything like that. I just mean like this actual title I feel like I've heard before, even though I didn't know anything about the story. The thematic ideas of the story seems interesting to me despite having only heard the title before, so I decided I would also include this in the video. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. This one's so short, I don't think it would be worth reading serialized, but I figured I'd bring it up anyway. Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This one I'm putting in the honorable mentions because I can't actually find sources about this one even being serialized. I think there's a couple places that mention it being a serialized novel, but doing other research on it, I can't actually tell for sure if it is or not. I know that 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is serialized, but if Around the World in 80 Days it was serialized as well, I can't find any form of schedule for it, so it would be a little bit hard to know for sure, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway. This would also be one that I'd more likely just read over the course of a month, like I'm going to with a lot of other Verne stuff anyway. And then at last, another honorable mention is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. The reason I have this in honorable mentions is because I'm not going to be reading this one serially, even though I kind of low-key want to, but I will be reading this book this December with a read-along from Monthly Classics, so obviously it couldn't necessarily make the list for the serialized publishing, but it is one that I did want to bring up because it is a serialized novel that I do plan to read at some point anyway. So now let's kind of talk about the actual books on the list. Now, there's going to be several I'm going to mention. These first two are going to be sort of authors in general that I want to read serialized because a lot of their work was published serialized. The first one of these I did mention earlier in the video, that being Charles Dickens, just kind of in general. You know, he released several novels, whether it be the Pickwick Papers, Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, The Old Curiosity Shop, sorry, Barnaby Rudge, Martin Chuzzlewit, even though I've never heard of that one before, Dombey and Son, David Copperfield, Bleak House, Hard Times, Little Dorrit, A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, or Our Mutual Friend. Basically, all of the novels that Charles Dickens wrote were published originally in a serial format. Some of them followed a monthly schedule, which if I were to do these for a read-along or something like that, instead of following a monthly schedule, I would do a weekly reading for them rather than monthly, just because I don't want to take that long to read some of these books, especially with how long a couple of them are. I know a couple of these books he did originally publish weekly as well, like A Tale of Two Cities was originally published weekly. This might be the one that I want to start off doing a sort of serialized read along for, since I know several people who read it recently and enjoyed it. I was going to read it with them, but just didn't have the time to, so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just read it soon anyway. And then I found that the original serialized publishing, I think, ran from like April through November or whatever of the year that it was originally being published. I can't remember for sure, but I want to say that was approximately the schedule. So I was like, okay, well, maybe April through November of 2024 or something like that, I'll kind of do a read along of A Tale of Two Cities, because that would be fun, and that would be kind of like a nice test run for this kind of project, I think. But like I said, Charles Dickens is an author who did a lot of novels that were all published pretty much serially, so I kind of want to try doing this with Dickens especially. But another author that I found published a lot of his work serially was Fyodor Dostoevsky. So whether it be The Idiot or Demons, Crime and Punishment, or The Brothers Karamazov, all four of these novels I found were written and published seriously. I couldn't figure out one way or the other if his other novel, I forget what the title of his other novel is, let me look. So a few of his other novels that I'm finding here based off of Google, being like Notes from the Underground is another one that is popular. I've heard of White Knights and The Gambler as well. I don't know if these other ones were also published serially. I just know that the four that I just listed, being The Idiot, Demons, Crime and Punishment, and The Brothers Karamazov, were all published originally serially. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I could do a serialized sort of reading for Dostoevsky, especially since Dostoevsky books are books that I feel like I wouldn't struggle with, but I would probably take very slow and would probably, because I'm a slow reader anyway. Anybody who's watched this channel for a while knows that, because I say it all the time, and I apologize for repeating it all the time, but I am a very slow reader. And for books that are a little bit more deep, that can be a little bit more, it can be more deeply analyzed, I should say, books that are also more philosophical are going to be ones that I take a little bit slower in general. And since Dostoevsky kind of fits all those boxes, you know, checks all those boxes, I suppose I should say, I feel like he would be another author that I could enjoy doing this kind of a thing for. But let's kind of also talk about some other miscellaneous classics that I would like to read in serialized. format. The first one that I'm going to mention here is going to be The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. Dumas did a lot of his writing serially, and to the point that apparently, according to my research, there were times when he was publishing like 4 novels at the same time serially in different areas, and that to me is kind of crazy because Dumas wrote a lot and he wrote really quickly, especially for an author of the time. But The Three Musketeers is one that I would like to read serially for a couple different reasons. One, because I'd be interested in doing it, but also because when I read The Count of Monte Cristo in March of 2023, I kind of struggled with it for the last 200, 300 pages of it. By the time I was getting to that point, it just felt like I wasn't making progress, even though I was reading 50 pages a day. It just kind of got tedious in a weird way. Even though the book itself wasn't tedious, the actual reading process felt tedious. And when it comes to certain long books, I feel like it would be more difficult to get, you know, feel like there's a tedium to the reading process if you're reading them in a serialized format. I feel like if you're taking it slow and you're deliberately doing that rather than trying to plow through it, I feel like I'd be more likely to get more out of it in that way. So I want to try doing something like that with The Three Musketeers, another Dumas novel, compared to how I plowed through a lot of Count of Monte Cristo over the course of a month and admittedly struggled with it for a little bit of that time solely because I was trying to plow through it. Another book that I could see myself reading serially is Middlemarch by George Eliot. This was a book that I did not actually know was serialized prior to doing some of my research for this, but this is one that I feel like I would read serially because it's one that I feel like is, according to some of the stuff that I've heard talked about it, is one that not everybody loves, and a lot of people you kind of have to like find yourself breathing the world, like enjoying the world that Eliot is describing in the novel to really enjoy kind of what's going on in the actual story, since there isn't a whole lot going on in the story. And for something like that to be really immersed, I feel like reading it slowly would be the way to do it. So again, it would be a situation where I just want to do a serialized format because it would force me to be deliberate and slow with how I'm reading it. So that's another thing that I'd like to do. I'd also love to do Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, sorry, in a serialized format, even though this book's short enough that I think it wouldn't be horribly worth doing in a serialized format when I could just read it all in a couple weeks anyway. But I'm not entirely sure with that one. Maybe I'd just kind of do my own serialized thing instead of following an original publishing schedule. I could just do like each part of the novel in a month or in a week or something like that and kind of see how that goes. Another one, and this is not one that I plan to get to anytime soon, like maybe give me 3 or 4 decades, but Ulysses by James Joyce. If there was any chance of my reading anything by James Joyce, this is probably the one of his books that I feel like I would read, and if I was going to read it, I would probably prefer to read it serially rather than doing it, all in like a month or a couple months like that, just because I know that Joyce is known for being a rather complex writer, for being to some degree fairly satirical in a bunch of different ways, and because of this kind of stuff, I feel like I would have a hard time with it if it was just like a main book that I was focusing on. So if it was just kind of something that I was doing at the same time and working on slowly, again with the serialized format, it would work better for me. Now let's talk about 4 other novels that I would like to do serially that aren't necessarily classics in the way that some of the books that I just talked about are considered classics, or books that can be, are just generally a little bit different in general. One of these is going to be Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. This is a book that I actually used to own. I don't know if we still have it in the family library below downstairs in my house, but I would be kind of surprised if we do because my mom got rid of a lot of books several years ago. I would be kind of surprised if this was one of the books she decided to keep, but this is a book that I've kind of had my eye on since like 5th grade, but I knew that it would be a little bit too heavy for me for a lot of my life. But it's one that once I learned was serialized, I was like, okay, that's a book that I still want to read. Why not do it serially? Like it was published over the course of a couple years. Like, why not just read it serially? I feel like that would probably be the easiest way for me to enjoy it rather than trying to focus so hard on something that's a little bit heavier in terms of the topics, and being a little bit more real than some of these other books would probably be another book that I'd like to do serially is The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. This is another one that's a little bit shorter. But one that I feel like would be very conducive to a serialized format, especially since the Screw Tape Letters is a series of letters. So they're kind of like short pieces of, they're not even really a story so much as far as I'm aware, and I feel like it would be easier to read them because of that. Another one would be The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Sorry about that. The Secret Garden is an iconic book. It's one that I don't know horribly much about. It's one that I want to say my mom read this out loud to my little brother when he was in like first or second grade or something like that. Maybe third or fourth. I don't remember. I just know it was a long time ago. I think my mom read it out loud to somebody in the family. Not 100% sure, but I feel like that happened. I might just be making it up though. But this is a book that I'm not sure how much I would just be inclined to read it anyway, but if it was a book that was, say, voted for as a read along, a serialized read along in a Discord server or something like that, it would be one that I would absolutely do with everybody else because that would be kind of fun. And because it's a book that I feel like a lot of people would say everybody should read, even if it's not one that I'm horribly interested in just inherently, but it is there anyway. And then finally, the last book that I will mention on this list is very different from everything else on this list. That is because it is The Green Mile by Stephen King, which I believe was originally published in like 4 or 5 serialized volumes. Stephen King books I could easily read, just not being in any form of serialized format. But since this was the one random book that he published seriously, that's not the word. This was the one random book that he published serially. I feel like it would be kind of enjoyable to see what happens if I were to follow a serialized format for that. It would be kind of more exploratory for that one, and that one would obviously not be for several years until I get to that book in my reading Stephen King's chronology, or rather bibliography, I should say. But it is, like I said, another one that I feel like would be kind of fun to do in that format. I just think it would be enjoyable to read some of these books serially, especially some of the ones that are a little bit longer or more complex or more philosophical, some that are a little bit deeper, more real in some sense. I feel like these are just books that, you can find a whole new type of enjoyment if you found yourself reading them more deliberately, slowly, in a serialized format rather than just plowing through them. There might be some of these books that some of us might be able to get more out of in that way. So if I have my Discord public at this point in time, I would probably have the Discord linked in the description of this video below, probably, even if I don't link it in other descriptions. If not, then you can always go to seasonalproductions.com. If the website is live, I will have a link in the very top right of that page saying join the Discord. You can click on that button and it will redirect you over there. So if you watch this video and you want to join over there, maybe eventually next year we can kind of plan to do some serialized read along type stuff. Like I said, I might very well do one for A Tale of Two Cities through the majority of 2024, so I think that that would be fun. Thank you guys for watching this video if you did. Sorry it turned out a little bit longer than I was thinking it would. If you are interested in another top 10 list that's a little bit different very soon, next Thursday I will be doing one about my top 10 poems by Edgar Allan Poe. As long as I've read them all, that video should come out next Thursday. If maybe there's a chance that doesn't, but I'm working my way through those actually rather quickly as of recent at the time that I'm recording this video. So I think I should be able to do that video. So that's one that I'm very excited for, especially since relatively soon after that, I'm planning to start a new segment on the channel called Short Story Saturdays or Short Story Sundays, where I kind of do a short story every week or two by somebody, whether it be Poe or Lovecraft or whoever the heck else. I have a video on that from, I don't know, a month ago or something like that, asking for short story recommendations if you want to do that. Actually, that would have been closer to 2 months ago. If you want to recommend me some short stories for that, I would appreciate that as well. Go check out that video, by the way. You might enjoy yourself there, but I'm going to go ahead and get out of your face. I've been rambling a lot in this video. I apologize for that, but thank you for joining me in this one. I'll be back again next week.